Hi everyone, JJ here with the Art of Value. Welcome. Well, today we're going to look at more super investor portfolio updates, 3 more. Over the last few days, I've been doing these updates. Today, it's going to be Mohnish Pabrai, Guy Spier, his friend, fund manager, and Chuck Akre Capital Management. I'm going to use Ticker Terminal again because they show the international portfolios of these investors, not just the US listings, or most of the international ones anyway. You can see here it tracks the investing gurus. I'll put a link in the description to Ticker Terminal if you hadn't checked that out yet. So here's Pabrai Investments. Here we can see his international portfolio, or most of them anyway. I think there are some that aren't here. One that I know is Prosus, which he owns 10%. Prosus owns a big allocation to 10% in their portfolio. I think he still owns that, but I'm not sure. But then these are his main portfolio allocations. We can see here that his biggest allocation, 34.37%, is racist in Turkey. He's talked a lot about that in interviews. And then we have Alpha Metallurgical Resources, which is a coal company. So we can see here the percentage change in the number of shares held in that last quarter. We're talking about the last quarter of 2023 here. And we can see that he sold about 10.69% of that position. That's a coal company. And we go down here. The only other activity here is Arch Resources, which is another coal company. 200.36% increased allocation there. And Warrior Met Coal, 100%. So he's bought that position as well. So he's pretty heavily into coal these days, but that's 8.61% of his portfolio here that we know of. And Arch Resources is 8.75% of the portfolio, which is a lot smaller than that top racist position. I believe that that is so big because it's done so well. He doesn't rebalance the portfolio, as I understand it. And so those are the changes that he's had this quarter. And Consol Energy is the last one, which he sold a little bit of there, likely to buy these other coal companies. So he's got 4 coal companies now, really heavily into coal resources. He talked about this. Coal's become a 4-letter word in the world, and he thinks there's some value to be had from there. And we can go into these companies and see how they've been doing. That's interesting. Let's go into Resus first and see how that's actually been performing. Over the past year, it's actually up 42.8%. And I think he's had it for longer than that. So it's up 307% over the last 3 years. I don't think he's had it much longer than that. I'm not sure. But over the 5 years, it's up 4,000%. Perhaps he has, because he's talked about it having a really big return. So it's done incredibly well. That's 113.4% CAGR over 5 years. Now, if you're getting value out of this episode so far, I really appreciate it if you remember to hit that like button to help the algorithms to spread it to more people. Thanks. Let's have a look at some of these coal positions, how they've been doing, perhaps since he bought. We can see that 100% Warrior Met Coal. Let's have a look at that. Over 3 months, we can see that it's up 13.2%. So he's probably done well out of that. And over the last 6 months, it's up 45.4%. So these actually performing well, this company in particular. And if we look at Arch Resources, which he increased 200% in the quarter, let's have a quick look at that. So we can see year to date, it's down 4.7%, but over the last 3 months, it's up 4.5%. So it's starting to perform a little bit. Over the last 6 months, it's up 19.8%. So he could have been starting to do okay out of these positions. Now, Consol Energy, which he sold down just 6.95% in the quarter. We see that year to date, it's down 21.9%. So significant there. But over 3 months, it's down 19.5% also. So probably going down while he was selling it. And over 6 months, it's down 5.1%. So a bit of an up and down right there, and he's been selling that down a little bit. I wonder if that's got anything to do with it, that it hasn't been performing so well. And Alpha Metallurgical Resources, which he sold down 10.69% in that final quarter of 2023. So year to date, that's up 9.5% so far. And over the 3 months, it's up 53.3%. So doing well over that last 3 months where he was involved in the company. And over the last 6 months, I think he's had this for a couple of quarters. So a couple of these coal companies, or 3 of these coal companies, he's had for at least 6 months. So this one's up 91.2% over that time. So doing well over that time. So that's all the activity in that quarter. He hasn't touched any of those other positions as we see. Just let them run, let them compound. We don't talk about Edelweiss Financial very often. He's held that for quite a long time. Sun Tech Realty and also Rain Industries, which he's had for quite a long time. That's just 3.8% of the portfolio, and that's an Indian company. Now, while we're looking at Mohnish Pabrai's portfolio, I want to point out the book that he wrote some time ago. I've read it. It's a really good book. Still worth reading, I think, to get inside his head the way that he thinks about investing. It's called The Dando Investor, the low risk value method to high returns. His thinking has changed a little bit since then. I watched a lot of interviews that he's in, and his thinking has changed since then, but it's still worth reading, and I highly recommend that book. I'll put a link to it in the description if you want to check that out if you haven't read that already. Now let's move to Mohnish Pabrai's friend and fund manager also, Guy Spier, who lives in Switzerland. His fund is Akre Marine Capital Management, and he is known for not having much movement, like buying positions and just keeping them. Mohnish Pabrai's had quite a lot of movement in his portfolio in the last few years. On the other hand, Guy Spier hasn't really. He hasn't sold much, and he tends to just buy and hold for the long term, which is how a lot of long compounding investors say, be patient, keep with it, don't interrupt the compounding unnecessarily, as Charlie Munger said. And we can see here in this past quarter that it's been reported the percentage of shares outstanding held is in that column, but next to it is the percentage change in the number of shares held. And he just hasn't done anything again in this quarter, so not much to report here, except for down the bottom here we see iTech, which is 2.91% down. But rest of it, you can see his positions here. His biggest is Berkshire Hathaway, then American Express, Indian Energy Exchange. That's an interesting one. We'll have a look at that. I'm going to pull that up soon. And Bank of America, MasterCard, Ferrari, which I believe he was in on with Mohnish Pabrai. Mohnish Pabrai sold out, and Mohnish said that he regretted selling that because it's done quite well. Berkshire Hathaway A shares, which are the much more expensive shares. And then we have Micron Technology. So Mohnish Pabrai sold out of that, and so did Li Lu, but Guy Spier is still in Micron at the moment. And Moody's Corp, that's another classic stock. And Akre Capital Management, who we'll look at, also owns that, has for a long time. Alibaba is another interesting one. He's bought Alibaba and he's still holding on to that. Mohnish Pabrai sold out of Alibaba. He talked about how Tencent was a better company for him, and so he owns that through Process. I think he still does. So Daily Journal, of course, that is Charlie Munger's investment vehicle that he had, the company there, and he still holds that even though Charlie Munger is no longer with us. Seritage Growth Properties, that's a surprise because Mohnish Pabrai also held that and he sold out a while ago, but Guy Spier's still holding on to that. He has $2.6 million worth, so not a huge position. His biggest position in Berkshire is $38.4 million. And Alphabet, 1.7, so a bit of tech in there, and that iTech AB position, which we'll have a look at to see how that's been going, maybe to see why he's selling that down. This is the iTech AB company that Guy Spier has been selling down a little bit, and year to date we can see it's down 27.9. I don't know how long he's held this for, but it's down 29.7% over the 5 years. What it does is a biotechnology company develops and commercializes fouling prevention products, and it's from Sweden. So that's interesting there that he's been selling that down a little bit, but it's the lowest conviction in his portfolio. And now we can see the Indian Energy Exchange, which interests me. The year to date, it's down 13.3%, and for the 1 year, it's up just 0.7%, but over 3 years, and I think that Guy Spier's owned this for quite a long time with the influence of Mohnish Pabrai. I think Mohnish Pabrai first put him onto this company. From hearing them talk together, I get that impression. And so over the 3 years, it's up 41.1% with a 13.1% CAGR over that time, so not too bad. And over 5 years, it's up 170.5%, which is a 22.4% CAGR. And I think he's probably owned it for that long. And what is the company? Indian Energy Exchange Limited operates a power trading platform. The company enables price discovery and risk management for participants in the electricity market, including industries eligible for open access. It's a play on the Indian energy market, the growth of the Indian energy market. And Of course, that's a growing economy. A lot of people are saying it will be similar to growth to how China has been over the last few decades. So really, it seems to be a bet on the growth of the Indian electricity market, and there's much needed there. Now, also, Guy Spier has a book which I've read. This is a really good read as well. It's called The Education of a Value Investor. You might have heard about it already, but if you haven't read it, I would recommend this one as well. It's called My Transformative Quest for Wealth, Wisdom, and Enlightenment. It's more of a memoir kind of thing of his trip into investing and, his changes over time. It's a really good read. He tells a good story here, so I'd really recommend that. And I'll put a link to that, a referral link in the description as well. Now we turn to Akre Capital Management, Chuck Akre. And as I understand it, he's retired. I don't know how retired he actually is. I don't know how much he's got involved in the company. I would expect that he does sort of have some involvement, especially when it comes to buying and selling big positions. This is over a long period of time this portfolio has existed. This is like a museum of multi-baggers of compounding over decades, really. I really appreciate his portfolio and the way that he's invested. Might have heard of the three-legged stool, which I've talked about before. I'll put a link in the description to that, actually, because I think that's worth having a look at if you are not familiar with how Chuck Akre has invested over the years. He's done incredibly well in some of these iconic companies. And one thing that's been observed is that portfolio doesn't have like the Magnificent Seven in it. He hasn't been buying those companies, but he's managed to do incredibly well even without having those kind of companies. If we look at here, MasterCard, he's talked about how incredible that company is. And also Visa, he's talked about those two companies, the moats those have. He didn't give too much away, but he's talking about the economics of those companies and the moats being incredible. But having said that, look at this. He's sold them down a little bit. Or they have. I don't know if it's him or people at his company. It's really hard to think that they would sell it down with kind of out his permission, even though he's retired. So 13.48% of MasterCard down and 26.92. One possible reason that they've been selling is because money's being pulled out of their fund, and so they've sold it because of that. So it'd be hard to see why they would sell at this time unless they thought the prices of the stocks were absolutely egregious and it was a good time to sell. But even then, I don't think he would do that. MasterCard 17.16. So number 2 is Moody's Corp. Moody's is a 14.86. You notice that Guy Spier had this as well. So American Tower, which is the famous one that's been a 100-bagger. Chuck Akre's had more than one 100-bagger over time. I think the other one is Berkshire Hathaway. It's been a 100-bagger, but many of these have been multi-baggers. So American Tower, nearly $1.5 billion worth in that portfolio. We have KKR and Co. Constellation Software, another huge compounder over time. Is that 100 bagger? I think it is over time. I don't know how long he's held it for. And that's 10% of the portfolio. And that one doesn't show up on the US portfolios. If you're looking at Data Roma, it wouldn't show up there. It only shows up in, say, Ticker Terminal, which has the international portfolios, because that is, of course, a Canadian company. Both Mark Leonard heading that. I've made videos about that before, about him and about Constellation Software and the spin-offs, the new spin-offs that Topicus and Lumine Group are spin-offs from that are doing also quite well, and people have high hopes for those. And so next is O'Reilly Automotive, Visa, Robo Technologies, Brookfield Corp. So this is just a roll call of excellent companies. CoStar Group, Danaher, there's Topicus. They would have got Topicus when it was a spin-off from Constellation Software. And CarMax, Brookfield Asset Management, Digital Bridge Group, which is kind of like American Tower in a way. It's digital infrastructure, but much smaller. But you'll notice that they've been selling these down. There's a lot of sales down here as we've been going down the list. It's interesting to see. That's why I think maybe some money's being pulled out of the fund, or the only other reason I could see was that they think the market's in danger, perhaps, but it's really unusual to see so much activity on this portfolio. So 26.92% down in Visa, minor sales in the other ones, really. 0.25% in CarMax, 0.23% in Brookfield Asset Management, 1% down in Digital Group. So these are really minor, nothing, nothing really at all to say that they're losing conviction on it, really. Berkshire Hathaway down 3.21%. Again, that's kind of a surprise that they've sold some of that down. And Verisk Analytics is 7.03%. And Dollar Tree, that's a concerted sell at nearly 25%. So a quarter of the position's been sold there. Okay, here we go. I've picked some of these stocks out from the portfolio to have a look to see how they've been doing over time. So year to date, Dollar Tree, that's a big sell down that they've had, is up 0.6%. So not much has happened. So in the last 6 months, when they sold this in that last quarter of 2023, it's down 0.6%. So really not performing over that time. And, over 1 year, it hasn't really either, down 1.7%. Over 3 years, up 29.2%, which is 9.2% CAGR, which is probably not really enough for them. Having these multi-baggers over time, they kind of expect to have more than that. And even over 5 years, it's 38.1%, which is not a good performance. So really not surprising that they've sold that, really. Okay, now we have Constellation Software. I had to look at this because this is one that's been a compounder over time. As I said, headed by Mark Leonard, who is, I think, one of the best capital allocators and heads of companies in the world. You can see even year to date, it's up 14.1%. Tech stocks have been doing very well this year and over the past year, and they buy technology companies, they buy software companies, many of them. It's a serial acquirer. If we look at over the past year, it's up 56.7%. So it's had a ripper, a stonker of the past year, and over 3 years, it's up 116%. And let's just skip to 10 years because we can see that it's up 1,323% over that time with a 31.3% CAGR. So you won't find many stocks, many companies that have compounded better than this over the long term. And if we go to right back to all 17,000%, over 17,000%, compounding at 34.3% the stock price over that time. So look at the curve on that graph. You would not see anything better than that. So as I said, I've made videos about this company before. Go and check those out in the ones that I've made so far if you want to know more and you don't know much about Constellation Software. And now we're going to look to one of the spin-offs. This is Topicus, and I've said that I own this stock, own this company. It's been doing very well. So year to date, it's kind of similar to Constellation Software. Really, the share prices have been sort of moving fairly similarly, which you'd kind of expect. But this is the same business model, but in Europe. And so they spun this off relatively recently. Over 1 year, it's 28.6% CAGR. So it went public in the beginning of 2021, and over that time, it's had 16.5% CAGR, or 58%. So it's had a roller coaster ride. In 2021, I got fairly egregious, the price, really. I've heard Chris Mayer talking about this just recently on a podcast because he owns it. He owns both of the spin-offs as well. So far, it's been doing well. It's a 15.5% CAGR, but it's still early days for Topicus. And as I said, this is one of their 100 baggers over time. American Tower. If we go back a year, it's actually down, but over 3 years, it's down as well. But 5 years, up 1.8%. And over the 10-year period, it's up 132.2%. Mind you, they have been buying a little bit, still buying American Tower a little bit over, even in recent times. But if we go back during the dot-com bubble, around that time is when he first started to buy it. I believe it was under $1 at times when he bought it. This doesn't even go back that far. This goes to 2005, and even then it was $18. I think he bought it for under $1, and it was kind of dead ridden. It went through some tough times, but he held it all that time and added to it over time. And it's turned into this massive multi-bagger. Now, to my knowledge, Chuck Akre doesn't have a book, but this is a very good book with an interview with him in it and many other great investors, including Mohnish Pabrai and Spier. It hasn't been out for that long. It's by William Green, who also does podcasts. It's called Richer, Wiser, Happier, How the World's Greatest Investors Win in Markets and Life. So there's 3 books today that I'm pointing to. I really want people to read investment books. It's the best way to learn about investment. I've read this one. It's an excellent book. In fact, I think I'll read it again soon. You can see by the ratings there how good that book is, and his podcasts are excellent too. So another book that I'd highly recommend, and I'll put a referral link down in the description as well. Now, if you don't know yet or you haven't checked it out, I've started the Art of Value Patreon. Over there, I go more in depth about stocks, particular stocks I'm researching, stocks that I own as well, which I don't really talk about here very much. So I'll put a link in the description if you want to check that out. It's only the price of a cup of coffee each month to participate in that. So see you over there. Now, what do you think about these 3 investor portfolios? Are there any stocks that you think that have been a good buy, or do you think that they shouldn't have sold some of the ones that they did? Let me know your thoughts on any of the stocks and any of the portfolios. Let me know in the comments. Now, I mentioned this is the third episode in just a few days about the portfolio updates of super investors. I'm going to put links up here to the previous two. If you haven't seen one of those already, go and see one of those now. And thanks to everybody for watching or listening, and I'll see you in the next one.